All right, this lesson is on Photoshop and what it's used for, its interface such as palettes and tools, and creating, changing the settings of, and saving new documents. Photoshop is a digital imaging software used by photographers, designers, videographers, and 3D artists. I'm going to focus on sharing some of the ways that photographers and designers use Photoshop, since that's how we're going to be using it in our class. Photographers use Photoshop for correcting exposure or modifying color, cropping and aligning or rotating photos to achieve better compositions, restoring and retouching compositions, combining multiple images into composites, and simulating a variety of photographic lens effects. Designers use Photoshop for creating textures for print and web design, manipulating type by using 3D extrusions and layer styles, creating comps of websites and mobile application designs, and applying special effects like blurs and lighting effects. Photoshop is fully integratable with many other Adobe softwares, and there's dozens of other types of people using Photoshop in their daily work, creating amazing projects and original artworks like these. Alright, now that we know what Photoshop is used for, let's move on to opening the program so we can learn to create a new document and change its settings, and also get familiar with what the program looks like, the interface, and the important tools and palettes we can access within it. Okay? And what will pop up is this interface here. It allows you to either create new documents, open existing documents, or if you've opened documents in the past, it'll give you a list of most recent documents, okay? So I'm just going to show you how to create a new document here. And basically I'm going to go over what these settings are. But please note, you will be using a template. So these are just settings to simulate that, but please use a template instead, okay? Because the template has other items inside that you're going to use. All right, so up here you can do a title name. So we're just going to call this Testing New Document, okay? And then you can do different presets here where you can tell them, hey, this is web, or this is for mobile app design, or this is US paper. And if you change these settings, all these settings will change. We're going to manually change these just so that we can go over what these mean. So first thing we're going to do here is we're going to change this to inches, just because this document would be safe for print. The width here is going to be 12 inches wide by 18 inches high, okay? And then the resolution, if you were normally doing something for print like a movie poster, the resolution would be 300, but because you have to send these to me over the web and we don't want them to take that long to send, we're going to lower it down to 150, okay? And then we have color mode. Normally, if you were doing this for actual print to a professional printer where they mass produce these, you would use CMYK. But because we want all of the functions in Photoshop to work while we're working on it, we're going to put it to RGB. We're going to leave it as 8-bit. But just know that when you're done with this, you would convert it to CMYK if you were to be sending this to print. All right, for the background, we're just going to leave it white, like paper, but you do have other options to leave it transparent or to change it to some other color, okay? So we're going to go ahead and just ignore these. These are advanced color profiles. This is more for when you're advanced, so we're going to skip over that. When you're done with that, we're going to go ahead and just hit OK. And what will happen is it'll open up this document here, okay? Now, this is just a test document. This is what it would look like at the settings. If you wanted to make sure that this came out the way you specified, you could go to Image, Image Size, and here, if the width and the height are 12 by 18 and the resolution is 150, it means you did it correctly. I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of that. If you were going to be saving this file, you would just go to File, Save As. You'd locate on your desktop your I led Garcia Don't Delete folder. You'd select that. And since you already named this when we were opening up the document, it's already here, so you're fine there. You can just leave it like that. And then here, you just want to make sure that it's set to Photoshop. Sometimes it might be set to one of these other defaults, so just make sure it's Photoshop. And then when you're done, go ahead and hit Save, and that'll save it, okay? When you're done using it, you just close it up. All right, and it'll go back to this here. All right, to cover the different parts of the interface now, I'm going to go ahead and open the template so that you're familiar with what Photoshop has to offer and what things do. It's called Your Name Proj 2 Final that you'll be downloading later on in the coming weeks, okay? So we're going to go ahead and select it, and I'm going to open it. It's going to ask you if you want to update the text. I'm going to say no. All right, we're going to get started. This is your tools palette, okay? Now, notice in some of the subsequent videos, it may look a little different. Some of these tools in general may look different, like the move tool looks like this. The healing brush might look a little different, and some of the other tools might look different. Just look for the name, and generally they'll look somewhat similar, but they might be slightly different, but that's okay. They will function the same, okay? You have different tools here. Some of these tools down here look like what Illustrator does, and they function very similarly, but there are some differences. And as we go through these tools in subsequent weeks, we will focus more on what each particular tool does. Okay, but your most important tool in this program is your move tool. This is what allows you to select images and move them. And as you select any of these tools, you'll notice that these settings up here change that correspond to this tool so that you can do different things with that tool. Okay, if you go down here, you'll notice you have these color swatches, and you have the ability to change the foreground color, which is this one on top, and then this one is the background color. You also have the ability to set these to black and white, and you also have the ability to switch them around. Okay, and in here you can go in here and change colors and specify colors. Okay, all right, so that's your tools palette. Moving on over here to the right, these are some of the most important palettes that you usually have. By default, they should be open. If they're not, or if you accidentally move or close or delete one, like I just closed that palette right there, if you go into Windows and you go into Workspace and you select Reset Essentials, it will give you back these palettes here, okay? So those are your most important palettes. I'm going to go over the most essential ones. The first one is your layers palette. It's where every image is stored. Anything that you put into this document is stored. And you can turn off layers, turn on layers, rearrange layers, rename layers. You can do all of that, and we'll be learning more about that in subsequent videos, okay? The other palette that's really important is this history palette. And as you move about and do things, say that I move an object here, notice it just started adding text in here. I'm going to go ahead and expand this, and you can also, if you want, you can also move it out so that it's always visible, so that it's not collapsed in here. But if you close it and it disappears on you, you can access it under Window, History, or you could do the Reset Essentials again. Okay? All right. Now you'll notice that it added a different option here. If I were to go here and move it again, it basically keeps tracking what you're doing. So the history palette is kind of like your undo. You'll notice you don't have multiple undos. Like you can't go more than once under here. Okay, you can just basically, you can't undo again. So if we wanted to undo, we could go this way and it'll put things back. It'll step back, and you can jump from the very beginning to the very end, or any of the steps in between. Okay, so that basically allows you to control your undos and your history. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put this back into this area by dragging it and dropping it back into this panel here, and that collapses it back in. All right, another palette that's really important is this properties palette. Okay, and what this property palette does is basically, once you start using some of your different tools like your masking and your adjustment layers, which we'll learn about more in subsequent weeks, the properties to that, or the settings to that, can be controlled within this properties areas, and all of the settings will show up for any type of action that you create. Okay, so that's your properties palette, and that's pretty much it. This concludes your lesson on what Photoshop is about, its interface and tools, and how to create and save a new document. If you have any questions, please be sure to contact me.